I'd like to welcome today's guest on Arcane Threads, Kaitlyn Turner, who specializes in psychological astrology. She's a highly prolific writer, and I enjoy her thorough descriptions of the planetary influences on human psychology. Kaitlyn, it's clear that you have a very Jungian approach to your work. Would you like to explain what it was that first drew you to psychological studies and particularly the works of Carl Jung?
Mm. Yeah, so I first discovered that psychological astrology was a thing because I didn't realize that through this woman, Darby Costello, and she was actually on Chris Brennan's podcast, the Astrology podcast. And it was the first episode of his I'd ever listened to. And she did a talk on the elements and how they relate to like personality types, which is directly, related to Carl Jung's work on typology, which is kind of like his first Myers-Briggs before Myers-Briggs was a thing. And I was interested in astrology my whole life, but then when I heard her speak and how she spoke about it, I was like, who is this woman? I just have to learn from her. I need to talk with her. And so I scheduled a birth chart reading with her, and it sounds dramatic, but it really did change my life because it introduced me to this whole subcategory of astrology that I didn't realize existed. And after our reading, I started researching her more and found that she was associated with the Mercury Internet School of Psychological Astrology, which is run by John Green, who is a direct student of Liz Green. And she's like my favorite author and astrologer ever, who was a Jungian analyst herself. And Carl Jung was always a name that I had heard kind of through different people I follow, like Jordan Peterson or this guy, Paul Chek, and they would talk about Jung and his ideas. And I love how they blend together is, using depth psychological techniques merged with the language of astrology. And for me, I just have always been so interested in the unconscious and shadow and really not being afraid of plunging into the darkness, because I think that's where like all of the juicy goodness is. And not only that, but like a lot of stored energy that kind of stops us from living our full potential. And that was like really the work of Carl Jung, is liberating this energy of repression and suppression of emotions. And then that opens up so much room and space in our psyche to experience the opposite. So it's paradoxical. You kind of like go into the shadow and the depths and the darkness and the uncomfortability in order to feel just like more meaning and joy and happiness in life. And so when I finished my reading with Darby, I found her. She was teaching at that school. I immediately signed up. And then I just found this beautiful, rich community of psychological astrologers, which also brought in more of Carl Jung's work because, as we know, he used astrology. And so he has wrote a lot about it and merged his concepts with the principles of astrology.
hmm So before you were drawn to his work, was there anything else in particular that piqued your interest about astrology? Like, what was it that got you on this path in the first place?
I remember being really young, and my late mother was really interested in astrology. And I remember she had this book, and I was like 11 or 12. And she was a very open-minded person. And she would just tell me things about the characteristics of Libra. And I was like 11 at this point. And so it was really interesting that it already was resonating. And she would say things. I'm like, that's really interesting that because I'm a Libra, I have these characteristics. And that's really the mystery of astrology. We don't know how it works,
Right.
why there's this correlation between the planets and the signs and the myths and all of that and us. And so I
Yeah.
just remember that leaving a lasting impression. And then my life went way on, of course. And it wasn't until I was like around 25 that I started this journey seriously and
Hmm.
learn it and practice it professionally.
Very interesting. So that brings up the question for me of the great mystery surrounding astrology, because by its nature, astrology tends to bring us into touch with some very spiritual topics. And one of the most persistent themes that I've noticed over time is the hyperfixation on these new age ideas about karma and reincarnation. And usually it's very punitive, based on the premise that our natal chart is a sort of tally scorekeeper for all of the horrible past life misdeeds, with maybe a few virtuous qualities or good deeds mixed in, and that these things linger on in our subconscious minds to dictate our current circumstances, as though everything in the chart is seen as a debt to be repaid. So, what are your thoughts on fate versus karma and this whole ultra karmic approach to astrology?
Yeah, I think that's why most people I get annoyed or in disbelief of astrology because they really don't want to be told like who they are as a person. And I understand that. And I wonder why people do hyperfixate on past life things. I mean, that's certainly an idea. I don't know. I don't believe that to be true because I just feel like this life is so special and we have one shot at it. I don't know.
It's like the only life we can do something about.
That's what I'm, yeah. And I think what people are maybe picking up on, because I understand the idea of like something lingering that we don't quite understand and it influencing in our
Sure,
now. Uh,
sure.
and what Jung believed, and this is kind of how Freud and him really one of the many ways that they differed, is Freud thought that our whole consciousness and personality was just a byproduct of our upbringing, whereas Jung really thought that we brought something into this life already with us.
Hmm.
And I don't, and he didn't think that was other lives. It was more like unconscious drives. And that's kind of how it relates to me in of astrology. Like when we're born, the chart is there from
Sort
day.
of like in our DNA, like our ancestry or the collective conscious, would
I
you
think
say?
all of it. Definitely
Yeah.
the collective unconscious, because I think
Yeah.
it stores everything. That's
Hmm.
every life that ever was. And I think that's why people feel so drawn to past lives or
Hmm.
time periods or other ethnicities that they aren't even in this lifetime. It's like, oh, I was an Egyptian in my past life or whatever. It's like, well, or maybe we're all connected to the storehouse memory of humanity.
The archetypes, yeah.
Totally. And so that's how it lives for me is that
Hmm.
you do bring in something. But fate is, I think, one thing, but as I think we both teach, we always have free will and
Hmm.
we have free will on how that fate is expressed in this life in a positive or a negative way.
Yeah. Free will is another really fascinating topic, because the more we understand our natal charts and transits, a lot of us are asking the question, how much free will do we really have? If all of this is written in the stars, it gets kind of creepy sometimes.
I think when I feel like there's a fatedness, I'm not in control of my life. And what Jung taught is until we make the unconscious conscious, it will direct our life and
Hmm.
we'll call it fate. And that means to me, these unconscious desires and drives and motives and fears and insecurities of these archetypes live in the unconscious. And they're actually much more dangerous in the unconscious because that's when they act up and like sabotage our lives because they're just really trying to like express themselves. And so
Hmm.
the more consciousness we bring to them, I think the less of a hold they have on us and then we actually have more free will. But the hard thing is is to bring them to the consciousness. And I think that's what people have a hard time doing because
Hmm.
it's so shadowy and uncomfortable and obscure.
They fear it's going to be too painful to
Mhm.
look at those things when sometimes that's the very liberation from the thing that seems to torment, many of us. And this brings me to the next question I've had, which is there's a saying by Jung that people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Do you think in today's world that people have lost touch with their souls, like collectively?
Yeah, I mean, to the extent they can lose touch with their souls, I mean, it will always be there, but it's not like palpable to them. And I think when it isn't, that does cause suffering, and that does cause an aimlessness through life, like what is the point of all of this, and um, I think the beautiful thing about astrology is that it can lift up meaningful parts of our personality that we don't really know how to articulate or understand. Like, I can't even, I'm sure you experience this all the time when you're in a reading with someone and you're like, well, does it feel kind of like this? And they're like, oh my God, yes, that's
Yeah,
exactly what it feels like. And it's like this surge of like really exciting energy comes up within them because I think that part of their soul finally feels seen.
yeah. There is something healing about that. So do you have any ideas of how people can reawaken a sense of that connection and a sense of their own divinity through astrology?
Looking at the birth chart, I mean, is really, really powerful because what it's so interesting is, people think, well, I'm a Libra sun. That's what I am. It's like, well, yeah, but you also have like eight other planets and there's like a full birth chart and they're all interacting with each other in a specific way. And so we kind of know ourselves as this like one self, but then when we start to explore, different parts of ourselves and how they may be unexpressed, then we kind of like we start to come in contact and feel more whole. And I think when people feel more whole, they naturally feel connected to their soul and they feel happier. And that's why Jung really believed in the power of the individual. He did not believe that the collective were going to come together one day and all hold hands and world peace together.
Yeah, yeah.
But like peace really starts within the individual. And
Hmm.
the more peace and love and wholeness that we feel, we give that out into the world. And that's how we slowly change, the like terrible things that humans do to each other.
Absolutely. Um, do you notice certain cases come up more than others in your psychological astrology, clientele? Like, um, I don't know. I notice for me, it tends to ebb and flow. Sometimes I'll get like a whole slew of people that have issues with, their spouse, or other people that have issues with their children, or some are struggling with childhood memories, like is there something that you see that seems to be very common, or at least, like maybe in the past year, this has been a really chaotic year for a lot of people, so a lot of fear and things like that have been coming up for people that I've noticed anyways.
Mhm. Yeah, I think every astrologer really attracts the right person for them,
Hmm.
the right client. And I think because I have so much Scorpio in my chart and I'm such a watery person, I do attract a lot of people who feel so much that, and they
Hmm.
just feel overwhelmed, by how they feel, or they don't feel anything at all. It's like that polarity, that access I deal a lot with. It's either like a lot of feeling or literally no water in the chart.
Yeah.
That's really interesting. And I think it's again, it's just the time in our collective where things are rapidly changing and evolving so much that we can't even run
Hmm.
from ourselves anymore. It doesn't seem
Yeah.
like we can, and we shouldn't, but like you were saying, people are really afraid and feel it's, quite painful.
Mm-hmm. So, would you like to share a particular myth or archetype that you most resonate with and how this would tie into your own natal chart?
Mm. Oh, I mean, the obvious one would be Persephone. And
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. I can relate to that very well.
I think,
Mm-hmm.
sailors can. And I think that um, for me, the part of the myth, just briefly describing the myth for those who
Yeah.
aren't familiar, is Persephone is a young maiden who is living happily amongst the flowers with her mother. They're quite close. And Hades comes up from the underworld and falls in love with her and abducts her. And
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's quite violent, actually, and
Yeah.
it's rape and torture. And she goes down to the underworld and eventually eats the pomegranate given to her by Hades. And so she's bound to that world and part of the time. And essentially, there's so much more to it. But what I've come to terms with in my own life is like, how is that Hades also like within myself? Because while I can really identify with Persephone being this person that just wants like to frolic on the earth and plant seeds and just
Yeah.
like very simple, superficial, neat, organized, tidy life, there is this part of my own psyche that drags me down. And that happens when we're not paying attention. And that's really the unconscious forcibly trying to get our attention. And that part is also, in every myth, every character is an aspect of ourselves. And so, what's been really alive for me in the last few years is realizing that there is this inner Hades that I created and through my environment was created that I have to also work with that needs love and acceptance because if not, then it acts out in these really violent ways that go against my conscious desires. And that's kind of what the unconscious does. I love this quote. I forget who said it, but we always get what we unconsciously want,
Mm-hmm.
hardly get what we consciously want. And so for me, that lives in that part of the psyche, which is what Jung or Jungian psychology would call like the woman's inner animus. And when
Mm-hmm.
that inner male counterpart goes askew in some way and is not worked within it becomes this like saboteur that wants to like drag it down with us. But if you can have this dialogue with it, then Persephone comes up back into the world. And so there's this like balance that is restored by going to these dark places, recognize,
Absolutely.
recognizing what the message is, working with it, integrating, and then living both, the light and dark parts of ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also, there's a wealth of information. Well, you alluded to that already, but I think the Persephone archetype is naturally very intuitive and in tune with what's going on in the world because of that, deep sensitivity and having seen, yeah, having seen, been dragged into the underworld, seeing that which is not obvious on the surface of things.
Mhm.
Um, is there also a myth that, or actually, I should say, um, your thoughts on current astrological events? Do you think that there are certain myths that tie into them for the collective
Mhm.
right now?
So many.
Right.
But I think, I mean, they're happening all the time, all around.
Yeah.
I think what is so interesting to me and what I feel is the biggest impact is Pluto moving into Aquarius after
Hmm.
being in Capricorn for so long. I mean, these moments of Pluto transitioning to another signs mark really big, I mean, huge collective shifts. And with Aquarius, of course, a myth I directly go to is Prometheus. And while on one hand, it's a really heroic story of Prometheus feeling like the gods had all the power and he wanted to give, power back to the people, and he took it upon himself to do that. And that was kind of the whole thing, is like he didn't understand why he was being punished by Zeus, because he's like, well, I wasn't doing this for myself. I was doing it for the collective.
Hmm.
And so it is heroic in a sense, but then the danger with Aquarius sometimes is like becoming too detached and not in contact with like empathy. And I think
Hmm.
we make technological advances so far without considering how they affect the actual human who's living that, then,
Hmm.
we can get really into dangerous realms because it's all justified, right? It's like, oh, no, no, and another example of that would be like Frankenstein, even
Yeah.
that, it's like, oh, why wouldn't we want to prolong human life by altering it? And it's like, well, sometimes we create a monster that way.
Right. And what happens to the soul then? It's like, yeah, you can maybe, have an extra limb attached or a new organ or just keep it going, get plastic surgery, just keep it going. But at what cost, really? And I'm not talking about monetary, I'm talking about to your sense of humanity.
Yeah. And Aquarius, right, can so easily detach from the individual and the body and the self and each other. It rises so high, it almost loses its like footing and what it means to be a human, all for the name and under the name of like advancement and improving a system.
And it's so ironic because it's really the sign of humanity.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's that interesting. Again, I'm always thinking in opposites because of, you know,
Yeah,
of Leo, because Leo
yeah.
does really honor the individual, and it has this sense of heart about it, and a sense of pride and of love and warmth. And I think when Aquarius kind of dissociates that need within themselves, then they just hyperfixate on humanity, but don't remember, it doesn't remember that humanity is made of individuals, and all of our actions have consequences to, each other.
Well said. Um, can you suggest any helpful tools or practices, to help people navigate all of the uncertainty that they're facing right now? You and I, we've been practicing astrology for a while, so we understand that a lot of what's happening, it's not brand new, it's cyclic. Even if we of this current generation or generations of people haven't seen this particular cycle, the earth has. But knowing that this is kind of new territory for all of us right now, and some people are handling it better than others. Is there some sort of general tool or guideline, using astrology or psychological astrology as a guide that you can share?
I think the more people turn back inward to themselves and really focus on who they are as a person, and because if you tune into the world and the news and what's going on, it's like so depressing. At least it is.
Yeah.
And it almost leaves you like so hopeless. You're like, what do I even do amongst all of this pain and suffering and confusion? And if we can just take, I think it's more productive if we take that worry and anxiety about it and just use that as fuel to go inward and to make sure that we are living in a way that we are proud of, and that we are following our hearts and we're being the change that we want to see in the world. I really truly believe in that. And using tools like astrology helps you understand and take back your own projections that you give out into the world, and you stop blaming everyone else. It's like it's the left, it's the right, it's the Christians, it's the atheists, it's this. No, it's men, it's women, it's and it's all
Yeah.
this blame game. And while we all have flaws and as groups of people, we're all acting negatively, but again, we don't have control over that. We have control of over our own lives and how we treat ourselves and how we treat others and our direct contact. And to me, that really is slow and painful work because it's not an overnight fix. You can go out and do things in the world that make a difference, there's no doubt. But like, really, I think the true work that needs to be done to heal this huge collective shadow that we all have contributed to is to withdraw our own shadow from that. And that is really done by knowing ourselves. And
Mm-hmm.
astrology is a great tool for understanding that, oh, when I get upset about something, this is the part of me that feels violated. And, how do I work with that? And how do I express that to those around me? And then that improves not only our own lives, but the lives of people around us.
Right. I do think it's important, at least in my opinion, to understand, that sometimes these feelings are based on real violations that need to be acknowledged and healed, and not just like, oh, that's all just my shadow kind of thing, or that's all just your projection. I do see what you're saying, and I agree to that extent, but it's like we also have to be able to have a space in, some space with the right people, with the right, you know, in a container of trust to be able to work certain things out. And
Mhm.
then it's easier to, well, some people do it on their own, not everyone likes to go to a shrink. I don't. So, but do you know what I'm saying? It's just
Yeah.
kind of,
Mhm.
I think it's helpful to have these tools, but also what I've noticed is that we live in a culture. I'm going to use this term that's become very, maybe overly used in our day and age, but gaslighting, which comes from a movie that people can look up. But the gaslighting thing is like, gaslighting means basically ignoring or belittling what's happened to a person or a group or in some situation to make light of it. Like, you're just crazy. You're making that up. That never happened. And what that does, guess what? It just makes those shadows and projections and all that hurt grow like, like a monster in the dark or like some sort of disease.
Well, I think, going back to the idea of getting to know ourselves better, then we can navigate, okay, this is certainly not me. And I need to love myself enough to recognize that and trust myself enough to know a boundary of mine or boundary of others have been crossed, and I won't stand for that. So
Yeah.
it's not about not taking responsibility or putting the blame on others. It's just really knowing, what is my stuff and what is someone else's stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when we know our own shadow, we can see it in others more clearly, and there's more of an actual boundaries that, because I'm all for boundaries and holding people accountable, but we
Mm-hmm.
have to know ourselves enough,
Right.
where I end and the other begins, and who
Mm-hmm.
are my values and what I will stand for and what I will not stand for.
Well said. Mm-hmm. You've written a lot about all of these topics on your Substack. Do you want to share with people, how they can reach you, and also if you have any projects that you're working on, and just things that you want to share in the coming year?
Yeah, I really adore Substack. I think it's such a great place for writers, and I really enjoy these long forum conversations because, as it's obvious, these concepts are really complex, and it's so hard to talk about them in like a short window, and they really need to be expanded upon. And for me, I'm really still in the exploration period myself. I don't know. These are all ideas, and I love just sharing and hearing from other people, and Substack is a really beautiful place to do that. So yes, you can follow me on there, which is Astrology and Psyche. And I write a lot about just exploring the myths. And I try and do it in a really neutral space to where it's not labeling anything as good or bad. It's just, what is happening. And I'm really active on my Instagram where I post a lot of just like observations that I find within my practice. And I also offer one-on-one chart readings, which is my favorite thing to do.
Hmm.
So you can book all of that or find my work on my Instagram page, Astrology and Psyche, which is where I'm most active. And I am coming up with like a little guidebook on like shadow work and just like reflective questions and how to use your birth chart to kind of start understanding yourselves better. And that will be coming out next year.
Beautiful. Looking forward to that. So are there any other things that have been on your mind this year as far as, we've talked about your own personal archetype and some of those in the collective. How about particular planetary alignments or aspects that you could speak to?
Going on right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, you did talk a bit about Pluto entering Aquarius. I mean, there's so much going on. There's a lot to talk about, of course, but I guess more from the psychological and also mythic perspective, like actual aspects and sort of the interpersonal or collective dynamics that those aspects or a particular like pick any aspect that it, for example, Saturn in conjunction with Neptune, and what is that bringing up for us symbolically?
Mhm. Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, to follow the thread of Pluto, because to expand
Yeah, oh, that's fine too. Yeah.
um,
Hmm.
expand on that, again, it's really such a fascinating phenomenon and as astrologers, we understand the timing and cycles of things. That Pluto's been in another sign since 2004, and it has just moved into a new sign and will be there until 2044.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That's like a really big shift. And,
Longer than the last one in Capricorn.
yeah, totally. And, and the thing about Pluto, I think sometimes people may interpret, and this is just my opinion, it is about transformation and all of that, but it doesn't really happen immediately. It's not like, oh, Pluto shifts into Aquarius and we're all just going to like be this beautiful collective together. And, it's like at first, Pluto really has to highlight the corruption and everything that like needs to be cleared up. So things
Yeah.
really get a lot worse before they get better. And I think we're really seeing that right now with like the AI is like the biggest example of Pluto and
Yeah.
all kind of like in this dialogue with, is this a good thing or is this a bad thing? And what are the shadowy aspects of it? And, why is it here? Because it's obviously here and we can't fight it now. And in some ways it does make life easier, but what is that like? What is that relationship? And that's just one small example of a manifestation of Pluto moving into Aquarius. But I think technology is really being highlighted right now, and I think we're a species that are is still relatively new to technology, um, relatively speaking, and it
Hmm.
really does take a toll on us as humans. I think when we're so absorbed in our phone all the time and we become slaves to it, I think that really diminishes mental health.
Hmm.
So, like right now, a really good thing I think that we all can do is like, okay, put the phone, like, yes, thank you, technology. Thank you for all your advancements and making our lives
That
easier.
we can talk right now and have this conversation and share it online.
I love it. Like, I really love that. And I don't want to put technology down in a bad way, but we do need to balance it out, I think. And we do that by just going out in nature more,
Yeah.
putting
Yeah.
it away. And I think for me, that's been such a healing as it's been my whole life. But like more recently is if I'm feeling overwhelmed or anxious or depressed and these feelings come often for me, it's like I just need to go out in nature. That's when I'm I'm missing is, I'm living in on my computer, I'm doing school, I'm doing all of these things, and I'm like, I just need to get off of it. And I think
Mm-hmm.
it's really good for everyone because again, we're still kind of new to what it means to have access to social media, you know.
Mm-hmm. And it is sort of pushed on us too, in that a lot of jobs require, you to be on the internet and everything's on the computer now, oh, you want to process that check or that, that doctor's appointment or whatever, it's everything is online. And so sometimes it's hard to get away from. It's like all the red tape and the bureaucracy. So it also takes a bit of discipline because in my childhood, none of this existed yet. And it didn't really come into my life until my young adulthood. And even back then, it wasn't nearly as, pervasive as it has become today. It's really hard to imagine how the younger generation is just, they don't know what it's like to go for weeks or months without the internet. And it can be very refreshing to just unplug from the machine because then you get to hear your own thoughts and then just again, I agree with you. It's, it can be helpful and it can be something that really, makes our lives easier in some ways, but I remember the days when either I was working on an article or a report, or even thinking of a reply to someone. Someone wrote to me because I was used to sending snail mail, through the post office. And I remember all the little doodles and stickers and, little things I would stick in there, like here's a little gift, a press leaf, or a bookmark or whatever. And it was all so exciting to see that. So once the internet came about, it was like, oh, this person wrote a poem for me. Let me see how I'm going to reply. So instead of doing that in front of the screen, I would go to my bedroom or look out the window and I would spend a few days working on it, and it back then it was just like it had more magic. Like there was this buildup. It wasn't this instant thing every day, all day. Like we now, it's so easy to just get pulled in. Like, okay, instant responses, instant entertainment. And it's like, so much is coming. And it's like, what do you think that does to our nervous systems? Like our brains are not really designed to process. I mean, they're capable. Our subconscious holds all of the information, but I mean, it's a lot of it is like taking away from more useful activities and relationships and realizations and like I'm wondering what is this doing to people's innate intuitive abilities, because I think all of us are psychic in some way, but if we're always on the screen, how do we really, a lot of people are talking about being psychic online, but it's like how much are you exercising those abilities?
Which is another signature of Aquarius, right?
Yeah.
It's so Uranian, which is electricity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's like it is I'm as an Aquarius rising, I can't help but like get high off of like thinking and ideas
Yeah.
and that's great. And I people should think more. I think we're not thinking critically. But it is really like balancing that because it can really, I just think of electricity shocking the nervous system. And it's this wiry energy that I know well, so I can speak to it. And I think that really just, again, dissociates us from the body, which is not what
Yeah.
we love our bodies. Our bodies are
Yeah.
beautiful and we need to take care of them.
Yeah. Well said. Is there anything else that you'd like to share today? I mean, we've covered a lot of really deep topics in a short time, and of course, there's always more to elaborate on.
Hmm.
But is there anything else that's been on your mind that, like to tell the world right now?
I think it's easy when you start getting into self-work and self-development practices is to be really hard on yourselves. And I had a comment on my Instagram the other day about the moon sign, and like a mother said, oh, this is really hard for me to read because I know that I'm impacting my children possibly in this way, and I feel terrible about it. And my heart was like, no, 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 that is not the goal or the objective of this kind of work. You really have to use a lot of love and compassion and empathy
Yeah.
for yourself when it comes to shadow work or self-development or anything, because we're all doing our best. I know that for sure, some more than others, but we're a byproduct. We are somewhat of a byproduct of our conditioning from childhood, which was out of our control. And a lot of us, we didn't have like really healthy, at least I did not have like a really healthy mentor that like guided me through these really hard life challenges. And so I think while it's easy to view psychological work or psychological astrology as really like depressing or dark, it's really not meant to be used with that lens, and it's used
Hmm.
to be used with the lens of like self-compassion and like acceptance. And it's these feelings that we have, whether they're good or bad, they are human, and we all have
Yeah.
them. And that's part of what makes us a whole human being. So I just want,
Yeah.
yeah, just if you're new to this work or you're interested, just like really be kind to yourself, because society is so messed up. And we're yeah, we have been kind of misled, I think. So a lot of the work is like unconditioning from these really big companies and corporations and entities that profit off of our sickness and profit off
Yeah.
of us feeling confused. You
Hmm.
kind of have to rebel against all of these systems that are like trying to make you sick, and that's a lot of work. So just be
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up because a lot of newcomers to astrology, they start reading when they start really getting into it, and then they get to the dark side of things. It's easy to feel bad and beat yourself up over it. I know that's how I felt when I was a newcomer, like a baby astrologer, just kind of looking beyond my sun and rising and looking at all the aspects and going, oh my God, especially with the whole karmic thing. I really had, back then I was a lot more open and influenced by some of those ideas. And I think that you might have already touched on this, but the ego does not respond well to shame on you, like that's bad. It's like, okay, all you're gonna do is make it worse. So,
well, yeah.
yeah, put up a wall. It's like, ho hum, ho hum. So then we can't really get in there and do the inner work. But I think too that uh, I could do a whole talk on this subject of how nuanced astrology is. It's like there are so many ways to interpret. There's like a general guideline, like a general theme that we need to understand as we're getting into, the planets and the signs and the archetypes and what do they mean, what do they represent and all of that. But then it's not so cut and dry. It's like it's this always, when you've got, Venus opposite Uranus, it's always going to mean you get together and you break up. It's like no, it's not that simple. It's in fact it might not pan out that way at all. It might manifest in a different way, and so we have to have a thorough understanding of all of these different influences. And like you said, Kaitlyn, compassion, like bringing that to a reading with sensitivity and compassion is so important because the delivery is going to make all the difference in how a person receives and processes that information and how they're able to, if it's something negative, if we brought something negative up, a gentle approach to be able to, okay, that doesn't mean okay, maybe I have this tendency or whatever. That doesn't mean I'm doomed or that I'm always going to do. I can turn this into a positive. Like challenging aspects like squares and oppositions, they can sometimes manifest in, beautiful ways, right?
Yeah, you look at the charts of people who have done anything significant in society, they usually have really challenging charts. And
Yeah.
it really is that dynamic of tension that sometimes pushes people to do something
Hmm.
extraordinary with it, or else they're like perish. It's like
Yeah.
that's the free will part of it, I think, is, there's pros and cons of literally everything, a highest and lowest expression of any signature or placement in the chart.
Yeah, yeah. It's just also like with trines, they are beautiful, representations of, often something that goes well. It's an innate talent. But if there are too many trines, there's the possibility that someone is going to just, rest on their laurels and not try hard to go beyond that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, I've certainly enjoyed talking with you today, and I hope we can do this again sometime. And also, I wanted to mention that, Kaitlyn, you are a member of the Astrology Club of Sedona as well. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, you're one of those regular speakers at Sedonia. That happens every month for the forecast. So if anyone is interested in hearing Kaitlyn speak, or again, like check out her work at Substack and um, Astrology and Psyche. I just love your posts because they're always very informative. You don't just have like one phrase or whatever, you have like several pages, and it's like all about, people with this, you know, aspect or this pattern, and it's very helpful.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, everyone. Thanks for listening. Until next time.